GOP consultant Vinny Minchillo, thank you so much and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
Thanks for having me.
So President Trump weighed in on the Cornyn-Paxton primary battle, which just got started last week. He said both of them are friends of his and both are good men. And he said we'll see who else gets into the race and maybe he'll make a determination at the right time. What do you make of those comments?
I think that's very interesting. And the business of predicting what the president is going to do is a very dangerous business. I think, right now in the short term, the president needs a lot of cooperation from John Cornyn to get all his agenda, passed. And that's very important to him. So I don't think the president's going to do anything until much later, until he's got all his boxes checked in the Senate.
So it didn't surprise you in the sense of, because he's very close to Paxton, and yet Cornyn has tried to portray his campaign as, hey, look, in the first term of President Trump, I was very key in getting votes for a lot of things, Supreme Court justices, the tax cuts, etc. So do you think that has really helped him in a sense?
Certainly John Cornyn has made a big effort to mend fences with the president. No doubt, and he's helped him out in the Senate. I think we'll continue to help him out with the Senate and get the president's agenda over the line. And that's what matters in the short term. We still have a long way to go. I do think the president will endorse in this race, but I don't think it's going to come until the very end.
Oh, like what, next year, like January,
Absolutely,
like after
yeah.
the first of the year?
Yeah, next spring, I would think. Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah, I think there's no reason for him to do it right now. I think it's what is that going to benefit him to do it now? He really wants to keep everybody happy and keep everybody working on his agenda. That's what he cares about more than anything else.
One other interesting thing he said was, again, we'll see who else gets in the race. Who do you think he meant?
I think he's talking about Wesley Hunt. He's very close to Wesley Hunt. Wesley Hunt is a dynamic rising star in the GOP. I think he's a really exciting candidate. There's a $1 million campaign being run by friends of Wesley Hunt across the state to tell us what a great guy he is. I think he's looking at this race hard. And if a third candidate jumps into this race, that changes everything.
How so?
Well, then we'll have right now we've got, a two-man race, two very well-known characters. Senator Cornyn, who's been a senator for a very long time, considered kind of like a George W. Bush conservative, old school Texas Republican. And then we've got Ken Paxton, obviously very well known, conservative hero of the grassroots, who's the AG. Two very well defined candidates. Wesley Hunt is kind of the new guy and the young guy at only 44 years old. So he would really change the complexion of this race. Number one, he'd push it into a runoff. And number two, he would bring just a whole new set of messages and a whole new set of aspects and visuals to this race.
He is a congressman from the Houston area,
yes.
And perhaps a lot of people up here may not know who he is unless you're a real grassroots conservative and you know who the players are. But why would he get into this race when you have, as you said, two 800-pound political gorillas with distinct brands?
It's a high-risk move for Wesley Hunt. And I think in a lot of ways, he and Ken Paxton would be splitting the anti-Cornyn vote. So he would hope to get himself into a runoff, probably against Cornyn. And again, you mentioned his name ID is not very high. You can buy name ID if you run enough ads, but it costs $5 million a week to run ads in the state of Texas. So he's going to have to come with an awful lot of money.
And do you think the Attorney General is nervous or should be nervous about this?
Absolutely.
Why?
Absolutely. The Attorney General is going to take a lot of heat from Senator Cornyn. The first thing Cornyn said after Paxton announced was, Ken Paxton is a fraud and a con man. So you know where that message is going from Cornyn to Paxton.
Right.
I would think if Wesley Hunt wants to get into a runoff, he's going to have to take Paxton out. So if Wesley Hunt gets in, Paxton's going to be fighting a two-front war.
And you think that Wesley Hunt would be saying the same things that Senator Cornyn would be saying?
Yeah, I think so too. I think Hunt would certainly take a few shots at Cornyn, to try to say, hey, you know what, he's not the conservative you think he is. But tactically, he would have to take Paxton out in order to take his space in a runoff.
So what do you think Paxton has to answer for as far as the primary race? I mean, because as you said, Cornyn has really gone after him and his
Right.
ethics
Right.
and his record, charges, various charges, as far as, the impeachment he was cleared of. He's not going to be charged federally, but he
Right.
did have a state charge that he is now satisfied. So what do you make of all that?
Well, I think Cornyn actually has the harder time here. Because with Paxton, he's had all these charges against him over the last few years, and those charges have been litigated, whether in the Senate in the impeachment trial or in the court of public opinion. I mean, we have heard all the charges against Paxton, and as far as Paxton supporters go, they've processed all those charges. So that's kind of part of the whole pastiche now. So Cornyn is going to have to either relitigate all those charges or find some voters where that matters more. The grassroots voters, they're with Paxton. They're probably not moving very much. But I think when you get into Cornyn, he's got to find some new voters, a little broader electorate than normally comes out for the Republican primary. He's going to have to identify them, he's going to have to persuade them, and he's going to have to get them out to vote. He's going to have to deliver the biggest get out the vote campaign that the state's ever seen.
Does it help that all of the statewide GOP officials from the governor on down are also on the ballot?
It's going to be tough for those guys. I think you've got this U.S. Senate race. They're going to buy every TV spot they can buy. They're going to buy every Facebook ad they can buy. They're going to buy billboards. They're going to buy everything in the world. If you're running in one of these other races down ballot, there's not going to be a lot of oxygen left in the room.
And what about Democrats? Because we've seen former Dallas Congressman Colin Allred, who ran unsuccessfully against Senator Cruz, announced that he may get into the race. He's strongly considering it, and who knows about other Democrats. What do you make of all that?
I think it's interesting that the Democrats seem to be very excited about the possibility of running against Paxton in a general election. So I think a couple of things there. I think number one, you might see a Democrat group jump into the primary and try to get Paxton over the line and fund a third party group that will try to get him over the line so he could be the general election candidate. That being said, I still think it's an awfully heavy lift, even for Colin Allred. That's probably the best opponent for them, but I don't think it's a winner.
And going up against Cornyn?
Non-starter. That's a non-starter. Cornyn will bring all the resources. He's certainly well liked, and that would be a suicide mission.
I want to ask you also about the tariffs. We've seen, politically speaking, in some of the surveys that we're now seeing, that President's popularity has taken a little bit of a hit. What do you make of the situation?
As far as
the tariffs and the fact that some of the polling.
Well, I think in the short term, the tariffs are tough on people, but I think a lot of voters are kind of taking a wait and see approach. Certainly a lot of Republican voters are taking a wait and see approach that, okay, we believe the president has a vision for this, has a plan for this, and we are going to get there. When we get to the midterms, we'll see. If the economy is doing better, I think the Republicans could have better than expected midterms. If the economy is not doing well, could be a bloodbath.
And what about the impact of getting the tax cuts from 2017 passed permanently? And there are some other ideas, no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, that kind of stuff. What impact, if that is passed, would that have on all this?
I think those taxes, the no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, I think was another one. I think those are promises the president made, and I think those are promises the president is going to keep. And I think those are going to be really strong for him and strong for Republicans.
Pressure's on the Republicans, though, to get it done.
Get it done, that's right. And back to the beginning of our conversation, he's counting on people like John Cornyn to get those things done for him.
Vinny Minchillo, GOP consultant, we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.